And I'd be like, sucks to suck.
My name is Alina Adams. I was born in Odessa, USSR. I wrote 2 books set in the Soviet Union. My daughter was born in America. I'm going to tell her about the Soviet experience through books.
This week, we actually have another trilogy. It's the Zoya trilogy. The first book is Zoya by Alexandra Pugachevsky. The second book is Zoya, Part 2, America. And the third book is Zoya, Part 3, Rupture. But we're going to focus on book 2, Zoya, Part 2, America, because that's what... You didn't like my introduction?
I loved your introduction.
Thank you. So we're going to focus on Zoya, Part 2, America, because that's the time period that I'm most interested in. So we've discussed this in past weeks, this theme that comes up over and over and over again in Soviet immigrant Jewish literature is how much do you owe your parents, the people who brought you to America and the people who have certain expectations. For instance, one of the things that come up here is the girl, Zoya, is told, well, you have to translate for your parents because you speak English and they don't. And as someone who went through that, I mean, my father, he spoke very good English because he had studied English in the Soviet Union. My mother didn't speak English at all. And when my grandparents came over, my mother's parents, my father's mother, and his aunt, they didn't speak English at all. So it fell to me, and I was 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. And yes, it was a massive responsibility. And I remember being really nervous at the time, especially when we had to have important meetings like at the Social Security office or when they had to fill out paperwork. It was very nerve-wracking. And now as a parent, I actually sort of understand more what they were asking of me. But on the other hand, there's 2 things here. One is that, well, that was the only option. I'm sure if there was something else to be done, an 8-year-old translator is really nobody's first choice. And second of all is, you know me, I'm a big believer in children should have responsibilities and it's good for them. So last week you told me that I keep asking you to review my parenting. And as I was explaining, it's not that I'm asking you to review my parenting. It's more as a parent, I'm trying to get a child's opinion. In this case, I was the child, but what do you think? And you have lots of friends who are children of immigrants as well, who I'm sure still to this day are translating for their parents. So as a youth, what do you think of that practice?
I think what you said about it being like the only option, that there's really nothing else they can do, was like kind of what I was gonna say, because like, yeah, like it's not anyone's first choice, but what else are we gonna do? We have to get this done. And I also feel like it's a very big Jewish value that like if you have the skills to help, you should help. So I've kind of been molded in that way, so I feel like that's how I view it. Like if you can help, you should help.
Another topic that comes up in a lot of books about immigrants is the education system in America, which, as you know, I have very strong feelings about because in my other non-author life, I actually write specifically about education in New York City and in America. And one of the things that I very often say, and it ties in very nicely with Zoya here, is Zoya talks about how once you come to America, the first thing you need to do is get out of your regular classes in school and get onto the gifted track. But that comes down to what I always tell my clients is what we call gifted education in America would be considered general ed and 3 years ago in Europe and Asia. So as your grandmother used to say, when I was in all these gifted programs, her line was, ah, yes, gifted, the children who can read and write. So there's this sort of attitude that education in America is perhaps not the best. I'm going to read you this paragraph and then you tell me what comes to mind. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Americans are so wasteful. They throw out all the beautiful Christmas trees right after Christmas. On December 26th, they're already done with them. But we can keep them and celebrate the New Year with a tree. What does that make you think of?
We love finding things on the street.
We love finding things on the street. And what's funny is that the character in this book, he's a boy who's a family friend, is so embarrassed that his mother drags things in off the street. Whereas for us, we still do. It's the funniest thing. Your grandfather is still, to this day, after having been in America for over 40 years, if he sees a delightful thing that's been thrown out on the street, well, you have to bring it home. And as he always points out, as he's dragging some large piece of furniture behind him is, you know, this is why we live so well in America, so we don't waste money. We take things in off the street. I think half the toys that you had at their house when you were a kid had all come from stuff that people had thrown out. And you survived, right?
I did survive. I had this great little racetrack thing that he found on the street and then he cleaned. It was
clean.
Awesome.
Yeah, we would like to stress they bleached everything. My father is very, very tidy, but we got all sorts of things off the street. And that thing that goes round and round that you sit on and goes and the racetrack. So you had all of these things. But apparently the characters in this book are embarrassed about it.
Which is crazy. And the thing about the people throwing their trees out after Christmas reminds me of how great my childhood was in December, because I would have Christmas, Hanukkah, and New Year's, and it was the best setup a child could ask for. I mean, I didn't really get Hanukkah presents, but in theory, it was like the best thing ever, because I get the fun of Christmas in New Year's, and no one else in my Jewish day school will get that, and I'd be like, sucks to suck.
Well, actually, let's address the New Year piece. So in the Soviet Union, as indicated in this book, New Year's is celebrated by a tree. Now, it was co-opted from Christians and turned into a non-denominational holiday, but the fact is Russians, or Soviets, celebrate New Year's with a tree that in America would be called a Christmas tree. So we went back and forth on this a lot. When I was younger, we did have a tree, which we found on the street at December 26th. Oh, actually, here's a tip. In the evening of December 25th, the people who are selling Christmas trees, after a certain point, they know no one's going to buy them anymore, and they don't want to drag them back because they're just going to be mulched, so you can sometimes get a tree on December 25th too, just a tip. But otherwise, you can get them on December 26th, and we would have them, and we would decorate, and it would be very festive. And then I also went to Jewish day school, and I learned that apparently that wasn't done, although, and this comes up in this book too, there are the Hanukkah bush people, the ones who have the tree with the Star of David on top of the Star of David decorations. That never seemed right to me.